It's hinting at Nazi phrasing over a picture of George Washington.
What was the Nazi
Did you see it?
What was
Did you see it? You didn't see it.
Well, what was the Nazi
You didn't see it. You
phrasing?
said you see it, but
Well,
you
you
didn't
just
see it.
what are you talking about? What is the phrase?
And you
What's the
didn't see it.
phrase?
And the reason.
Wait,
and
can
the
I
reason-
continue?
and the
Can I
reason-
continue my
You accuse
answer?
her of seeing it. You can't say the phrase.
I don't want to fight, guys.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Bigger problem.
Exactly. Party thing that said one people, one realm, one leader. Do you remember what the largest Nazi rally ever held in America, where it was held?
Have you ever seen a dollar bill that
No,
says
you
one
don't.
nation under
Yeah,
God? Have you
I know
ever read
don't.
John?
So
Have you ever read John Jay, who said we are one people with one
in
language?
Madison Square Garden in 19. That is not false. And only 3% have
Why don't I let finish? I get asked questions and you just talk and you talk. Everybody
so
else
you've
talks.
never talked over
So-
anybody. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so Charles, finish your thoughts, Scott.
Here's the deal. He ran on it, and he's doing it. And
But I do want to start with this idea of the Insurrection Act and whether this is the moment that the Trump administration has been waiting for. Scott, you have been convinced that this is the time.
yeah, they'd be well within their rights to do it. I mean, you've got a governor of Minnesota who has said out loud that he believes they exist in a state of occupation of the federal government. You've got people going off to trainings, training how to fight federal agents. You've got massive amounts of money flowing into these groups to fund this stuff. And you have a bunch of elected officials in Minnesota who seem to believe that federal laws do not apply there, and you have massive unrest and massive disorder in the streets. And just last night, a ICE agent was trying to arrest a Venezuelan national, and two other Venezuelan nationals, all illegal immigrants, came out and tried to beat him to death with a shovel, which has apparently enraged everyone in Minnesota. They have a lot of problems there, and if Trump decided to do it, I think he'd be well within his rights to do so.
Well, Scott's right that Donald Trump does have very broad discretion to invoke the Insurrection Act. If he does that, it will certainly be challenged in court, and I think he'll probably prevail because of how broad the law is. But let's also step back and get a little historical perspective here. If Donald Trump invokes the Insurrection Act over this, it will be the weakest invocation of the Insurrection Act in U.S. history. And let's just go through the recent history. The last time it was invoked, 92 L.A. riots, 63 people dead, $1 billion worth of damage. Anyone who was, most of us, maybe not you, but we're alive and remember that. And this is nothing compared to the LA riots. Before that was the late 50s, early 60s desegregation, when certain towns and states in the South were defying Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court for years, and Eisenhower, JFK, and LBJ all invoked the Insurrection Act to make sure that black students could get into public schools. This does not even begin to compare to that. So can he do it legally? I think he probably can. Is it a sound use of the Insurrection Act? I think it's historically completely out of step with the way we've seen it used by prior presidents.
The problem with Trump is that he doubles down on mistakes. So do I think he might invoke the Insurrection Act? Absolutely.
Hey guys, welcome back. They already sing the quiet part out loud. On national TV, you have Scott Jennings calmly arguing that this is the perfect moment to dust off the Insurrection Act, as if sending federal troops into Minneapolis is just another policy option on a menu. Why? Because there's unrest, because people are angry, because ICE, an agency already under fire for how it operates, was involved in a violent confrontation. And the pitch is simple. Chaos in the streets? Great. That's our opening to bring in the military. Jennings runs through the script. The governor acts like federal law doesn't apply. People are training to fight federal agents. There's massive unrest. Therefore, Trump would be well within his rights to invoke the Insurrection Act. Notice what's happening here? They take a real volatile situation and stretch it into a justification for extraordinary power. Not de-escalation, not accountability, not better policy. Troops on American streets against American citizens. And Ali Honing basically confirms the legal part. Yes, the president has broad discretion. Yes, he would probably win in court. But then he drops the part they hope you ignore. If Trump used the Insurrection Act here, it would be one of the weakest justifications in US history. We are not talking about a city literally burning like the LA riots. We are not talking about dozens of people dead and $1 billion in damage. We are talking about a government that has poured thousands of federal agents into a community, triggered outrage, and now wants to turn the outrage into reason to call in the military. That's the move. Create the tension, inflame the situation, then point at the reaction and say, see, look at this chaos. We have to crack down harder. This is how you normalize something that should never be normal, using a law designed for extreme breakdowns of order as a political pressure valve whenever a president doesn't like a city's leadership or state's resistance. And here's the problem, once you cross that line, it doesn't go back in the box. If you accept disorder plus political disagreement as enough to justify the Insurrection Act, you have just handed any future a loaded tool to use against protesters, state governments, even local officials. That's not law and order, that's federal muscle as a political weapon. We are going to break down exactly how this rhetoric works, how they sell it, and why using the Insurrection Act in the moment.
Absolutely, because he's losing here politically, and he's feeling embarrassed, and he's got to find a way out. And I don't know that there is a way out unless the grown-ups, the Democrats that run Minnesota and Minneapolis, come to him and say, okay, here's a deal, Mr. President. We'll make it look like you have a win. Just like, our friend from Venezuela had to give her Peace Prize to him today. He needs something to show that he won. And I'm hoping that they could come to some sort of deal like that.
And also as part of his kind of makeup, he believes that the only way to deal with dissent is to crush it.
Right.
That is not only horrible politics, it is un-American, and it is likely to fail. This is, and they've been building up to this idea that they will create the crisis and then they will solve the crisis by cracking down even harder than the forces that they used to create the crisis. They're asking ICE to do outrageous things. They are recruiting them using Nazi, white supremacist propaganda, hinting to that. And then people see that. People who don't recognize it as Nazi or white supremacists, maybe they just join anyway. But the ones who do recognize it see it as a hint, the same kind of hint as stand back and stand by. And then you put those people in the field. This is not people coming to Washington to protest. These are people being placed in my neighborhood doing horrible things to my neighbors. And when people respond to that, they say, now the problem we created, we will solve with more force. This is a horrible political play.
First of all, how dare you sit here and accuse ICE agents of being Nazi, Gestapo, and white supremacists when they are enforcing law? You just insinuated that they're apparently recruiting others. You said they're recruiting others, and then it's a dog whistle for others to.
Let's slow this down for a second, because history matters here. The Insurrection Act isn't some vague emergency button when a person smashed when things get uncomfortable. When it was used in the late 1950s and early 1960s, it was invoked to enforce constitutional rights, to stop states from openly defying Supreme Court rulings and blocking students from entering public schools. Federal troops were sent in to protect citizens, not intimidate them. That context matters, because what's being discussed now doesn't remotely resemble that movement. Legally, yes, the president probably has the authority. The statute is broad, intentionally so. Courts have historically deferred to the executive on it. That's not really the debate. The real question is whatever using it here would make any sense at all when measured against how it's been used before, and historically, it would be completely out of step. What you're seeing instead is something more familiar in modern politics: escalation as strategy. When pressure builds, when criticism grows, when polling turns sour, some leaders don't reassess. They double down, not because it works, but because backing off feels like losing. And for certain personalities, losing isn't an option. So the instinct becomes create a standoff, frame it as a chaos, then position yourself as the only person strong enough to shut it down. The crisis justifies the response. The response retroactively justifies the crisis. That's not governance, that's theater with consequences. And there's another layer here that's uncomfortable but necessary to acknowledge. When dissent is treated as something to be crushed instead of addressed, It stops being about public safety and starts being about control. Historically, that approach doesn't calm tensions, it hardens them, pushing law enforcement into roles they never designed for, asking agencies to operate in ways that blur legal and ethical lines, turning routine enforcement into spectacle. All of that increases friction, not trust. And once that cycle starts, it feeds itself. People react to heavy handed tactics. Those reactions are then used as proof that even heavier tactics are needed. The escalation becomes the point. That's why this movement deserves scrutiny, not panic, not slogans, not blind loyalty, but seriously someone look into it. Because the misuse of extraordinary powers rarely announces itself as abuse. And history has been very clear about where that road usually leads.
White supremacist chat rooms, iconography.
That's like we let Hitler drink water. So if you drink water, you're Hitler.
Did you not see the one?
Well, look.
Did you not see the one with George Washington?
There's plenty of stuff.
Did you see the one with George Washington?
Which specific one?
The one where they were using Nazi, hinting at Nazi phrasing over a picture of George Washington. Did you see it? Did you see it? You didn't see it.
Well, what was the Nazi
You didn't see it. You said you see it, but you didn't see it.
What is the phrase? What is the phrase?
And you didn't see it. And the reason.
Wait, can I continue my answer?
You can't say the phrase.
I don't want to, guys, hold on. I don't want to talk. Everybody stop talking. Just a second. I don't want to go down this cul-de-sac. All I was saying, just in response to your question, is that he wasn't saying ICE agents are Nazis or whatever it is. He was saying that some of the iconography that has been used, and some of the phrases that have been used by DHS on social media, people have linked back to very specific places where white supremacist ideology is utilized. You can disagree with that, but that is what he's talking about.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to say.
Now to the crisis at hand. Democrats created.
Crisis on making.
Just can you let it
Really? Because I think it was Joe
Brianna.
Biden who opened the border for 4 years and let in not only illegal aliens, but otherwise inadmissible aliens. And what did you think was going to happen when you let in millions of illegal aliens? It means that ICE must then carry out mass deportations because guess what? There are laws in the books. Now the question then becomes, do you care about enforcing laws on the books, or do you think it's okay to just ignore certain laws?
Of course we want to enforce laws on the books.
So that's what ICE is doing.
Obama enforced the immigration laws. He deported millions of people. He wasn't shooting people in the street. He wasn't breaking car windows. His poll numbers didn't collapse over it because he was being overly aggressive and un-American. Where are all the Tea Party people who had, the don't tread on me signs? Where are they today? We've got tanks in the streets in America. Not tanks, but troops in the streets in America.
This is the moment where the conversation goes off the rails. And it's not an accident. Watch how quickly the focus shifts. The second uncomfortable questions are raised about messaging and symbols. The response isn't to examine them, it's to shut the conversation down entirely by reframing it as an insult to rank and file agents. That's a classic deflection. No one in that exchange was saying that every ICE agent believes the same thing, thinks the same thing, or operates with the same intent. That's a straw man. What was being discussed was officially messaging, language, imagery, and tone that outside analysts and watchdogs have already debated publicly. And instead of engaging that point, the argument becomes, how dare you even raise it? That tactic is designed to end scrutiny, not answer it. Because once you concede that any government agency can be criticized for how they present themselves, you open the door to accountability. And accountability is the one thing this debate keeps trying to avoid. Then comes the pivot when the messaging issue doesn't land, the discussion jumps straight to blame. Everything becomes the fault of Democrats. Everything becomes a result of past administrations. Everything becomes inevitable. Millions came in, therefore anything that happens now is justified. That logic skips an important step. Even if you believe past policy failures created the current situation, enforcement choices are still choices. Tactics are still discretionary. Methods still matter. Laws don't mandate spectacle. They don't require mass disruption. They don't demand approaches that alienate local communities or confuse constitutional boundaries. Saying there are laws on the books is not an argument for how those laws are enforced. And that's the part that keeps getting glossed over. The real disagreement here isn't whether immigration law exists. Everyone at that table knows it does. The disagreement is about proportionality, restraint, and whether enforcement is being used to solve a problem or to send a message. Because when enforcement becomes messaging, it stops being neutral, it becomes political. And once that line is crossed, criticism isn't anti law enforcement, it's pro accountability. That distinction matters whether people want to admit it or not. This debate isn't about denying reality, it's about refusing to accept the idea that the only possible response to a complicated problem is escalation without limits. That's not strength, that's surrendering
Do
judgment.
you remember what the largest Nazi rally ever held in America, where it was held?
Have you ever seen a dollar bill that
No,
says
you
one
don't.
nation under
Yeah,
God? Have you ever read John? Have you ever read John Jay, who said we were one people with one
in
language?
Madison Square Garden in 1934.
All right.
And you know what picture was on that stage? George Washington. And you know what the person said when they got on the stage to introduce that Nazi rally? Was that if George Washington was alive today, he and Adolf Hitler would be friends.
And a
normal
president would
That's what that
before
is.
you run your
Thank you
mouth.
so
Let me just
much.
make one more note.
I won't
You were
run my
talking,
mouth as
Chris
often
was
as I'd
talking
like.
about.
Well, when you call people white supremacists,
Thank you, ma'am.
keep quiet.
Thank you, ma'am.
Scott, you talk a lot about these so-called 80-20 issues. So Trump seems to be on the way to turning immigration into at least a 70-30 issue, not in his favor. The latest AP poll says just 38% of Americans approve of immigration. That's way down from where he started. This is politically not working in Trump's favor. At what point are they going to realize that maybe things have gone too far?
Some of those people may disapprove because they want there to be more deportations even faster. You know, we've deported 2.6.
I don't think. Well, based on
You don't think
based
so?
on the
I
poll,
do.
hold on, Scott. Based on the polling, we have a lot of polling, especially this week. There's been a CNN poll. There's a Quinnipiac poll. It's pretty clear. They disapprove of his handling of deportations. They disapprove of what happened in Minnesota with Renee Good, and they disapprove of Trump's handling of immigration. If they thought he was doing a great job, they would applaud what has been happening so far, and they aren't.
I mean, look, we can debate the polling. I can only refer you to the November 2024 election, in which Donald Trump flatly told the American people he was going to deport illegal aliens. He was going to mass deport illegal aliens, and that's exactly what they've done. They've deported 2.6.
This exchange right here tells you everything you need to know about how framing is being used in this clash. One side is desperately trying to shut down the suggestion that imagery or messaging around enforcement can have broader cultural implications. The other side wants to treat every question about that as an attack on boots and badges. Here's the reality. When you put language or symbols out in public, especially from a government agency, people interpret them. That's not conspiracy, that's basic communication. And when critics point out that certain phrases or visuals echo historical or extremist tropes, that's not automatically accusing every individual agent of extremism. It's pointing out that official messaging matters because it shapes how the agency is perceived and whether people trust it or recall from it. But instead of engaging that, we get debate theater. One side insists ICE agents are Nazis, a point almost nobody truly debated, and the moment you say there's a hint, you get the classic pushback. Well, have you seen the exact phrase? Show me. That's deflection, not rebuttal. And it's effective because it shifts the conversation from why perception matters to did you literally mean this exact historical event or phrase? That's a sidetrack, not a resolution. Meanwhile, the moderator steps in and says, let's not go down that cul-de-sac, which is code for stop talking about signaling and symbols and get back to the scripted conflict. Then just like that, the focus snaps right back to numbers and polls because that's safer. Abby brings up a hot fact. According to recent data, immigration is now deeply unpopular, just 38% approval nationwide, a dramatic slide that shapes this whole fight. The critics are equating unpopularity with weakness of policy. Without addressing why people feel this way, it's perfectly possible to make the technical argument that enforcement is legal, but legality and public legitimacy are not the same thing. Scott Jennings pushes back with the old deportation metrics. We have deported millions. That's what people want. But that argument ignores the growing reality on the ground. Communities are heard, not just criticized. There are widespread protests, there are statewide general strikes, there are business closures in solidarity. That isn't just disagreement, it's broad civic backlash. And when people feel unsafe walking down their own streets, when they believe enforcement has gone too far, that's not just opposition, that's a breakdown in trust between institutions and citizens. Because you can have statutes and authority and codes and executive powers, but if the public doesn't believe those powers are exercised with restraint, transparency, and respect for civil rights, then enforcement becomes a political liability, not a solution.
Here's the deal. He ran on it, and he's doing it. And he's going to be the president for the next 3 years, and they're going to continue to do it. They've deported 2.6 million people. About 2 million have actually self-deported. Only 600 and something thousand have actually been deported through ICE or Border Patrol or other law enforcement operations. So the vast majority of people who are leaving the country are doing so through self-deportation. To me, the greatest question here is, why does it and why is it that Democrats in the state of Minnesota believe that they should be immune from or not applicable to federal immigration law that has been on the books for years? We haven't passed any new laws.
And again,
we haven't passed
that's not the
it
question.
is a
That's not the question.
It's
It
a
is.
misleading
That's not the question.
statement
It's
about
not.
how Democrats believe
At all.
Listen to their own
stationary
statement.
That's not the
law.
question at all.
Listen to their statement.
People are responding to the
Completely misleading.
cruelty.
It's
Well, look,
when you
people are
ask
responding to the
for
cruelty.
cruelty. It's not if you.
when we come back, we'll talk about what Democrats and people in Minneapolis are mad about, because there's some very specific examples that I want us to dig into. So let's push pause on this conversation. We'll continue.
So let's break down what just happened here. Jennings insists that the numbers prove the policy is working, that millions have left the country, and that immigration enforcement is simply doing its job. But Blow pushes right back, pointed out that the most of the people involved in this recent federal immigration operations do not have serious criminal records, and that using aggressive enforcement tactics only adds fuel to the fire. And that's really where this debate hits the core contradiction. On the one hand, you have the authority argument, the idea that because the president has the legal power to enforce immigration law, every tactical choice he makes is justified. On the other hand, there's the legitimacy argument, the idea that even if something is technical, lawful, it still needs to be effective, proportional, and legitimate in the eyes of the public. Right now, there's a real crisis of legitimacy in Minneapolis and across the country over these federal operations. Protests, general strikes, and mass demonstrations erupted after federal agents killed Renee Good, a Minneapolis resident whose death has become a flashpoint for criticism of how far enforcement has been pushed. Public opinion has sharply turned against how ICE is carrying out its mission, with a majority of Americans disapproving of recent enforcement tactics. That's not just partisan disagreement, that's a major disconnect between policy and public trust. And when you argue, as Jennings does, that this is what people voted for and that the policy is working, you're ignoring that many of the people turning out in the streets, closing schools, shutting down businesses in protest, they're the same voters whose trust is being tested right now. If you came here for honest breakdowns, not sanitized takes or echo chamber talking points, you're in the right place. We are not here to recycle what everyone else says. We are here to analyze, dissect it, and confront the uncomfortable implications head on. Because until the narrative catches up to the reality on the ground, we are going to keep breaking it down the way it actually is. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.